This episode of Blockchain 360 is only made possible by listeners like you. If you listen to this show on your Apple podcast app, remember to give us a review. Every review helps more people find the show and join our amazing community. For more information about this episode or for easy access to related programming, visit our website at blockchain360.co and subscribe to our free email list. Enjoy this episode.
This is the Blockchain 360 podcast. Blockchain 360 is a podcast of interviews and discussions about the current state and direction of blockchain. Thank you for joining us today. If this is your first time listening, then thank you for coming. The Blockchain 360 podcast is produced weekly for your enjoyment, and show notes are found at our website, blockchain360.co. Come back often and feel free to add the podcast to your favorite RSS feed or iTunes. You can also follow us on Twitter at Blockchain360. All links discussed today are included in the show notes.
Hi, my name is Brian Nilsson, and I am your host here on the Blockchain 360 podcast. My guest today is John Dean Markunas, and he is a real estate industry blockchain advisor and business development consultant. He is the principal consultant with the Power of Chain Consultancy, LLC, which is a blockchain advisory firm. His current work focuses on 4 distinct sectors: property title insurance, the timeshare industry, commercial real estate fractionalization, investment, and crowdfunding, with a special focus on land registry systems, title recordation, and land governance. Mr. Markunas has over 30 years of commercial real estate experience, including real estate development, brokerage, appraising, and title insurance, focusing on the U.S. and Latin American markets. Outside of the U.S., he has lived in and worked in Mexico and Brazil. He is an enthusiastic advocate and supporter of blockchain technologies. He is a member of FIBREE, which is the Foundation for International Blockchain Real Estate Expertise, and a founding member and co-chair of FIBREE's New York City chapter. He is also an active member of the Government Blockchain Association and is the working group leader in the GBA's Land Titling Working Group. John, welcome to Blockchain 360.
Good morning, Brian. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you on your podcast.
Thank you very much for taking the time to actually appear. FIBREE is really going to be a lot of what we're going to talk about. But before we get there, tell me a little bit about how you got into real estate, and then what brought you from real estate into blockchain.
Well, there's an absolutely direct connection from blockchain to real estate. But let me back up just back to perhaps 2015 or 16. I had been working as a real estate consultant in Brazil from 2011 to 2015, working with companies, real estate companies globally, that were interested in Brazil, and many of those were tech companies such as CoreLogic. Now, I returned back to the United States in the end of 2015, and I started to learn a little bit about cryptocurrencies. And in fact, that was Bitcoin. Now, I had no interest in cryptocurrencies at the time. I did not want to invest. And in fact, the advice I got looking over the internet was, if you have money to lose, do not invest in Bitcoin. I did not invest, but doing that research, I found out about blockchain, the backbone of blockchain and what it can do. And it blew me away because I saw the ramifications of it and the connection to real estate in general. So that's where I decided in 2016 to reconfigure my career from real estate consultant to a real estate consultant in blockchain technologies.
Well, here's the question. Part of your bio has that you lived in Mexico and Brazil, so you obviously speak both Spanish and then Portuguese.
Yes.
What took you to Mexico and what took you to Brazil?
Well, that's a good question. Let's back up to earlier. This will show you my age now. I was working as a real estate broker in California, in Sacramento, California, in fact. And I was getting tired of doing brokerage work in the US, and I wanted to do something different. And what came about was NAFTA, the free trade agreement, which passed in 1994 with the free trade agreement between Canada, the US, and Mexico. And I decided, and I was single at the time, to lock, stock, and barrel, take advantage of this new trade agreement, which it was opening up borders and business. And I moved to Mexico in 1994 and took a year off to study Spanish, which was had been one of my previous goals. And upon doing that, I stayed and moved to Mexico City and started working with a top company called Jones Lang LaSalle on a special project. Became a real estate broker and spent the next 5.5 years in Mexico. So that was a terrific opportunity for me to expand my global outreach and interests. And it also, which we might touch on a little bit later, Brian, it also exposed me to a developing country's lack of legal title to properties. And Mexico is a developing country, and there are many problems with their registration system. So I was exposed to that there as well. Now, you mentioned Brazil. Well, I have many years later, I guess in 2006, I married a Brazilian woman, and in fact, got so interested in that, I studied Portuguese, and in 2011, we decided to move back to Brazil, well, for her back to Brazil, and I became a consultant, like as mentioned earlier, representing companies going into Brazil and helping them with their due diligence and legal work to establish companies inside the country. So that's sort of how that got connected.
All right. Well, you have this company called the Power of Chain Consultancy. Now, what's interesting is you indicated in some of your information that you shared with me is that it is an LLC out of Wyoming. So why Wyoming?
That's a good question. I debated on, it could have been any place else. It could have been very much, well, been Delaware, where many companies are set up or incorporated in LLCs and other corporation levels. I decided on Wyoming for two reasons. One was Wyoming had passed several pieces of pro-blockchain and crypto legislation. And I thought by incorporating in Wyoming, this might serve me later on to some advantages if I decided to do business in state. I think the second reason was that one U.S. company is actually the first in the United States, a company called Medici Land Governance out of Utah, to actually create a legal and formal partnership with one of the counties in Wyoming to use blockchain for title recording. And I thought that was spiritually a great connection and energy connection for me, because that's where my heart is in terms of blockchain, is land registries and cadastral systems worldwide. So there I am, LLC in Wyoming.
Wow. Now, Medici has an interesting background. They were originally a spinoff of Overstock. Isn't that correct?
Overstock.com.
Right.
Yes.
So I didn't know that they had actually created a land registry group within the Medici Ventures, but that's very interesting. That's great. So that's why you chose Wyoming. And so what does your company actually provide?
Yeah, our services run the gamut from providing advisory services for startups, and previously for ICO assistance, which has dwindled. And what we provide are basically three things. One is we provide assistance for companies that are starting up in the blockchain space within the real estate sector. That is startups. On a second level, we provide assistance in terms of business development. I call it front-end business development, where we help them strategize how to expand locally or globally. In my case, I offer global services, expand with business. That's predicated obviously upon having a working and functioning product that's ready to launch. So that's the second level. And then the third level is, I would probably say, is related to customers and clients, and that's customer and client management. Once we've established business and new customers in the geographical region they're expanding in.
Okay. Well, now one of the things that's interesting about you is you're involved now with two organizations outside of your company. And one of them, of course, is the GBA, which is the Government Blockchain Association, where you're the leader of the Land Titling Working Group. So what is the ultimate goal of that working group as it relates to the Government Blockchain Association? Right.
Well, the Land Titling Working Group, I jumped on that pretty fast because that's my interest is mentioned. And it is a working group that is set up to explore blockchain technologies impacting or addressing land titling and land registry processes around the world. And in fact, that has grown from land registry processes to land registry processes in land governance, leading to economic development, which is the key. Now, what we do, our group identifies real estate use case studies, pilot programs, and the other solutions throughout the world that have been deployed in different countries with the goal of reaching out to government institutions. And it could be on a municipal basis, county basis, let's say, state basis, or a federal level. What we do is we educate, recommend, and consult and assist with the implementation of blockchain solutions in their respective jurisdictions. We started out doing creating a presentation on blockchain and real estate and land registries, or cadastral systems, as they're called in Europe. And we've branched out to there to a new initiative, and we're now developing a manual or guideline for governments or municipalities, which will help guide them, okay, or advise them on what blockchain is, what it can do, the benefits, and the ultimate goal of adopting it. So that's a big initiative, and it's something I think that will serve GBA well in terms of government support throughout the world. And of course, what we do, much of what we do is through, I don't know, the 50+ chapters that are set up throughout the world as well. So I've done a lot of presentations in different places. Russia, I was in Puerto Rico last year at the GBA Puerto Rican chapter presenting. And so that's what we do.
Cool. Now, one of the things that is obviously of interest to all the listeners is what challenges are there related to blockchain adoption and land registry sector? What are some of those challenges?
Well,
it seems to me, I mean, you know, I'm familiar with, of course, what Medici Partners had done up in Wyoming, but we have Estonia that has done quite a bit in terms of land registry. There's been a lot of land registry discussions and blockchain in Africa, in Africa. But it seems to me that there should be a natural affinity for the use of blockchain and land registries. But what are some of the challenges? I mean, to me, I don't see that there's many challenges outside of just institutional pushback, people not wanting to lose control of what they used to have.
Right. Well, it's interesting. You know, you mentioned Medici Land Governance, MLG. They're not only in Wyoming, they've signed letters of intent or memorandums of understanding with a couple of countries in Africa. In fact, you mentioned Africa, Zambia, and Rwanda. They're also most recently, a couple of months ago, announced in a press release that they're also doing a pilot program in Tulum in southern Mexico, near Cancun.
Sure.
So they're active. There are other companies as well that are doing things in different places, such as Sweden. You mentioned Estonia. There's also things going on in the US outside of Wyoming, such as Vermont, for example. So there is activity. I think in terms of adoption, ultimate adoption, there's two things that get in the way. And sometimes I refer to it as a little bit of a joke. And it goes something like this. Did you hear about the study that said that more people would be using blockchain if they knew about it? So the first part is education and awareness of what blockchain is and its benefits. The second part of that is overcoming, I guess, local or state or federal government doubt or objections to it.
Right.
Okay, so government bureaucracy in the mindset is not quite ready to grasp a new system. It's even tougher for countries or jurisdictions that are still paper-based to leapfrog from, let's say, paper documentation and recording to a new technology such as blockchain, because in between you have to be digitized, and many places aren't digitized. I was talking to representatives in the country of Albania recently through our GBA chapter leader there. And we were talking about doing a pilot program for the main capital, for the main region, the urban region there. The rest of the country was paper-based still. So there's a huge disconnect to blockchain technologies because of the lack of a digitized economy. And Brian, I think the third issue, which is related to that, is what I call bureaucracy disinterest, or political awareness, or political acceptance. You have to have an acceptance, but you have to have a political will. And many of these countries or jurisdictions do not have that yet.
When you say political will, what does that mean?
Let's refer to Estonia. Look at what's happening there in Dubai. The prince in Dubai makes all the decisions. That's the political will of the state. Estonia, a democracy, also has the political will from the federal government on down to institute digitized and other, and blockchain technologies. So you have to have the political will. I think a great example of a place that didn't have the political will is a fairly, I would say, sort of famous case within land registries. And this goes back to 2014 and 15, when a company called Factum out of Texas, along with one of their affiliates or partners, attempted to do land registry work in a section of Honduras. Okay, and they signed a memorandum of understanding. They were getting set up to provide blockchain services to us, an area in Honduras near the beach, finest beach areas in the country. Once the landowners and others within the land registry system there heard about this blockchain technology and this program, they opposed it. And the government of Honduras shut it down. So you have, I think—
What was their opposition to it? I mean, why would they not want to have the ownership records and land registry records on a blockchain?
It's a very good question. There's one simple answer to that, I think. In general, the answer is because they wouldn't be able to continue with land grabbing through collusion with their land registry offices if it became an immutable and transparent system. So in many countries, Honduras is a perfect example, there's a collusion between land registry and others that want to leapfrog the system and create their own land empires.
Right.
So there's an example of no political will to do the program.
Well, I have a question before we continue with really the main focus of what I want to cover in the interview. But, a lot of people have said that blockchain is going to be highly disruptive to the to land registry systems, and in the U.S. it would probably even eliminate title companies. Is that a possibility?
I don't think so. I'll give you my viewpoint on that. There's always going to be a need in the United States, especially for some sort of recognition of legal capacity to own property. And we don't have a torrent system. And a torrent system, such as in Australia, a torrent system provides the state providing guarantees on title. So here we do not have that. So you have to have a secondary guarantee, and that's in the form of an insurance called title insurance. So I think at some point, at best, it won't eliminate title insurance, but it'll streamline it so that it makes it much easier and cost efficient and faster to review titles, do a title search, and produce a title insurance policy. What does that mean? That means it'll be a lot cheaper to get title insurance and a lot faster. That'll be much faster process within the transaction process itself. So no, I think it'll still be there, title insurance, but it'll be cheaper and faster to use, and that's a good thing for consumers.
Well, that's good to know. So let's get to the meat of this interview, and that is tell me a little bit about FIBREE. And again, FIBREE is the federal, What is it?
Yeah, well, they call it FIBREE in certain parts of the world. I call it FIBREE.
FIBREE?
FIBREE is the foundation for international blockchain real estate expertise.
Okay.
It
Why
was
was it created?
That's a good question, because there was a void in the real estate industry, in the real estate sector in real estate globally, where there was no connection really for practitioners or people interested in blockchain, either blockchain or real estate. So it was created on July 9th, in fact, almost a year ago, or a little over a year ago, 2018, by professionals in Europe. And it's based in the Netherlands. It's a nonprofit. And it had the goal of bringing together real estate professionals and blockchain specialists from all over the world to simply exchange expertise and network, and to start to build a more formal and standardized structure for real estate transactions and land registry. The realistic expectations are it's going to try and allow the global real estate market step by step to discover and explore the true potential of blockchain technologies. So it's been a year now, and we celebrated, I should say, our first year anniversary with a terrific industry report, which is the Blockchain Industry Report 2019, which is now going to be an annual study produced by FIBREE. Now, I was on the editorial board for the first report, which came out July 1st of this year in Paris. So how FIBREE, how big is FIBREE? Right now, FIBREE is global. I mentioned they're based in the Netherlands. We have 42 geographical locations throughout the world with chapters in 23 different countries on 5 continents. And in the US specifically, we have about 8 chapters so far. I started the first chapter in the US, New York City regional chapter. We've now expanded to Chicago, Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, Seattle, Philadelphia, and a couple of other places. So it's growing, and it's growing exponentially with a lot of quality information and resources for people who want to stay connected in that space, blockchain and real estate.
So what continents are not covered? So obviously Antarctica, but is South America included in this?
Yes, we have an office a chapter in Brazil, Sao Paulo, Brazil. We have a chapter in Santiago, Chile. But we don't have chapters yet in Argentina, for example, and some of the other countries in South America, or Central America for that matter.
Right.
We're missing some countries in Southeast Asia and maybe Europe, but we're established in Canada as well. So it's got terrific coverage throughout the world. We have, Australia is represented now with a couple of chapters as an example.
All right. So for all the listeners out there, FIBREE, is it FIBREE or FIBREE? I'm still confused. You say it's...
I'd go with FIBREE.
All right. So FIBREE. Now, the FIBREE URL is going to be included in the show notes, as well as a link to the actual document that has been produced by FIBREE for their 2019 real estate document. See, what is the title of this exactly? It is the FIBREE Industry Report Blockchain Real Estate 2019. And again, so that will be included in the show notes so that you can actually access this. So you've said that this is going to be published annually, and you said that your role with the study was primarily from an editorial advisory standpoint.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that this was a study and there was research conducted. So how was the study and research conducted?
Right. First of all, the FIBREE writers, organizers for this report, reached out to 55 regional chairs throughout the world for feedback through a survey. So some of the information in the report, it's a 47-page report, quite a dynamic and informational source, I think, for anybody interested in blockchain and real estate or fintech on the financial side. But we have terrific resource in terms of our regional chairs throughout the world. 55 of them were consulted and are also listed in the report. So these 55 regional chairs provided much of the product feedback for the survey, which was done with these companies and initiatives. Now, jumping ahead of myself, but there were 501 products or initiatives recognized throughout the world, which forms the backbone of this survey or study.
What is 501 products? These are blockchain products?
501 products or initiatives. These are mainly startups or blockchain companies that are offering services in the real estate sector.
Okay.
These were analyzed and studied for the report.
And so when they created it, because when you start to look at the report, they're breaking it down by geographies. For example, I'm actually looking right now at the United Kingdom. It's showing, I guess, the activity in blockchain in real estate as the size of the corporations, whether they're government and public authorities, and small and medium enterprises, meaning less than 200 employees, startups. Mm-hmm. So in essence, this is a survey of the activity in the real estate as it relates specifically to blockchain, correct?
Absolutely right. And you speak of the geographical distribution. These 501 products or services come from 66 different countries and different continents. This forms the backbone of the database, as mentioned. 40% have headquarters in Europe, and Latin America is the least represented, with only 4% of the companies listed. And then you look at Europe, the Middle East and Africa has 30 products or companies. Asia Pacific, 75, and here in North America we have 139. So the geographical distribution is quite well rounded, and that constitutes the 500 or so companies that were looked at.
Now, one of the things that you have in here, of course, for each country is where is the country on the Gartner hypercycle chart. And what I find interesting is that you have in the UK, as an example, is that it's suggested that they're at the peak of expectations, while in the US, we've already passed that. We're down in the trough of disillusionment. How is it that how was that actually created, that the determination as to whether there was going to be an opportunity or whether the hype is, how is the hype actually measured as part of the survey?
Well, it was measured, or their metrics included as much as possible, being as objective as possible with the data that was available. So many of these, several of the companies, for example, were started in 2016, okay? And they also looked at these companies and tried to find out when they started and how they were funded, in what phase. So what happened was they looked at the answers to the survey from these companies and developed a framework to see on the scale of where they were in terms of their progress. And I think a couple of things that are really interesting about this in terms of incorporation and growth phases. The analysis showed that 119 of these products, 24%, no longer seem to be active. That is to say, they started up, they could not produce a viable product or get out to marketplace with a revenue producing service. And the other thing is, of the 365 products for which the year of incorporation was found, for example, let's say 2016 or 2017, on average, 16% are no longer active as well. So
in 1 year?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
So the conclusion was in a new industry startup phase, which perhaps isn't too surprising, I don't think, to us maybe, and to some of our listeners. If about half of these products were no longer active, almost 1 in 3 startups with blockchain products for the real estate industry would would cease their activities within a few years, and that's what we're finding. So we have ones that are staying, that are on the growth phase, have gone beyond the seed and growth phase into producing products that actually service a problem or provide a solution to some friction in the real estate.
We need to now take a small break. We're forever grateful to our corporate sponsors. The sponsor who has been with us since the launch of the Blockchain 360 podcast is the Blockchain Academy. The Blockchain Academy is a global leader in blockchain training. Their latest initiative is the 10K Blockchain Developers Training Initiative. The Blockchain Academy is seeking to train 10,000 developers on Hyperledger Fabric, Hyperledger Sawtooth, Corda, and EOS. Enterprises and developers can learn more about their comprehensive boot camps by visiting their websites at theblockchainacademy.com/10KBDI. We'll now return to our podcast.
So
now, one of the things I should mention to the listeners is that all 501 of these companies are listed in the report, including their not only their location and what continent they're on, but also their website. So even with 16% of them no longer being viable, there's a wealth of information that's a part of this particular report. One of the things that I would like to kind of know from you, at least, is what is the top 3 highlights that came out of the report?
The top 3. Well, it addresses several aspects of blockchain and the real estate industry. I think one of the things that it provides up front, I think, for people who are just getting into blockchain and real estate, or even for those of us that have been in it, it cites a study that was done, or research that was done some time ago, about a year and a half ago. And it talks about prop tech, blockchain and property and real estate, and they divided into three segments: prop tech 1, prop tech 2.0, and prop tech 3.0. And this puts some things into a framework to advance to conclusion in the study. And when we talk about prop tech 1.0, this is from about 1980 to 1985 to 1995. This is when traditional processes were done with paper-based faxes and telephones with many intermediaries. The latter part of 1985 to 1995 to 2000, we are still in prop tech 1.0, that segment. We're finding that software now enters into the marketplace to support real estate processes, and there are a lot of real estate software and services that supported the industry and digitalization. Prop tech 2.0, let's say roughly starting in 2005, obviously includes online, the internet, and also includes smart real estate and a sharing economy, and obviously leading to blockchain by 2015. And then we segue from an online world of real estate and sharing economy vis-a-vis the internet. We land in prop tech 3.0, which includes blockchain and other technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth. So the report sort of focuses on 2015 and beyond, and it covers 3 areas, or three sort of sectors that blockchain will be impacting. Very simply, or very generally, the first sector are real estate transactions. These are deals done, buying a house, buying a commercial property, trusting on third parties and intermediaries to get the deal done, to do the research, and to provide the services, whether they be appraising, surveying, title insurance, and so on.
Right.
Real estate transactions are slow, expensive, and ineffective. So anyway, blockchain will help there. The second part of this, which is huge, which is a huge buzz now in the industry, is real estate tokenization, or asset tokenization, or fractionalization of real estate. And this is the second aspect, which is which is analyzed. And then the third part of what the report emphasizes or leads us to is a decentralized infrastructure overall. And that is the blockchain, which connects the disparate vendors and processes under one umbrella or onto one backbone of an infrastructure, such as blockchain. And I think what's really important to understand, especially in terms of one of Fibree's goals, is that we're trying to head and lead the effort to create a decentralized infrastructure based on common standards for interoperability. So one of the conclusions, which is quite obvious, I think, right now, is the lack of common standards and definitions for creating an international, let's say, base for blockchain transaction work or even blockchain asset tokenization. So this is something that is really high on Fibree's list now of objectives as we move forward in our second year of operations, to work with other organizations to create a universal international standard and common standards to produce interoperable blockchain platforms and services.
All right, so when you say that they're creating standards, common definitions, so these service providers, they are providing solutions to the real estate market. Is there when you say the standards are being defined in terms of what they're doing, or in terms of solutions for existing pain points? When you say standards, how is the standards going to be functional across global geographic distributions where rules are vastly different? I mean, one of the things that you've mentioned is that there's a huge, in terms of membership, orientation that's European based. I think you said that like 47% are based there. How are these solutions coalescing and congealing into a unified system to address all these? And what are the pain points that need to be addressed in every one of these solutions?
I think that's a huge question, and I'll try to answer it in a couple different ways. One of the things that the study pointed out was in terms of the geographical distribution of the products or services, they pointed out 10 top countries that are used in the product database or the survey. And you'll if we review this, you'll kind of see how far spread out these companies are geographically. The number one ranking is the USA with 124 companies or products or initiatives listed in the survey. The UK followed with 53, Singapore with 28, Switzerland with 27, the Netherlands with 26, and then down to Spain with 15. So there were 10 top countries. Now, if you zoomed in on these countries and these companies, you'll see they're using different blockchains, they're using different applications, and they're not connected, and they should be. Just as an example, let's take the example of land registry, which I'm very familiar with, in the United States. There are 3,481 counties in the United States, and each county has a recorder's office where documents are recorded for property transactions, titles and deeds are recorded. And there's about, I guess on average, there's 70 recorder's offices per state. Texas has the largest number of land registries at 254, and the state of Delaware has 3 recorder's offices. But either way, these recorder offices work somewhat in a siloed, independent way. So they're not connected to each other within the state or with other states, obviously. So what we're trying to do, let's say even with recorder's offices, to create a platform where there's a common language and a common standard that a state can use to connect all the recorder's offices onto the blockchain, perhaps independent of what kind of software they're using. So that example can be taken over to, let's say, um, exchanges, or I should say asset tokenization, where when you're fractionalizing a real estate property, one company may be doing it differently than another, and selling these fractions or tokens of representing fractions or ownership of real estate. These tokens are supposed to be able to be sold easily, quickly, with a lot of liquidity involved. And many of these tokens are not standardized to be sold on what's called exchanges throughout the world. So there's a lot of work to connect these services and their backbone, which is the blockchain, and the applications, to be able to make them interoperable. So it's a huge undertaking, I think, right now. And what we're trying to do is Fibery especially, is trying to help create a more decentralized but connected system for everyone to be able to communicate and transact on.
Okay. So let's take a step back and share with me, what is your thoughts about the future of blockchain in real estate? Are we going to see rapid adoption? What is the adoption uptake going to be as it relates to blockchain, as it relates to real estate? And is that going to be partially driven by what is the infrastructure, meaning the technological infrastructure of each country, or is that going to be something that will be in countries where there's limited infrastructure adopted earlier simply because it provides greater value?
Okay, in my opinion, and I wrote an article about this some time ago, about a year ago, and people in this sort of ecosphere of blockchain and so on, they call it a revolution. There are books called The Revolution of Blockchain.
Right.
I don't think it's a revolution. If you take the R out of revolution, you have what? Evolution.
Right.
So I believe this process of adoption, mass adoption, is going to be an evolutionary process, and it's not going to be it shouldn't be perceived as a revolution, disrupting social and economic development as we speak. How long will it take? I think in terms of real estate, as opposed to, let's say, the financial world, which is where it really started, so-called fintech, real estate will take longer. Looking at blockchain for real estate transactional use, I think that'll be quicker than adoption by land registries or cadastral systems. But if you want to talk about in terms of time, I think that it will take 2 years to get the momentum going in terms of education and awareness for governments, especially, and that means land registry systems and other processes such as voting and healthcare.
Right.
It'll take another 3 years, I'd say 5 years out, for it to be uniformly adopted, where land registry offices or governments are now saying, why aren't we using this new technology? Let's ramp up and get going on it. So I think in terms of timing, it's 5 years out. And we've kind of sort of gone over some of the challenges of that, or issues related to that, the bureaucracy and so forth. And what I call, the legacy institutions who are reluctant to change, and they're protecting they're protecting their legacy systems and jobs and so forth. So there's that as well that's thrown into the mix in terms of challenges to overcome.
So you're basically saying that probably within 5 years, we'll be looking at a wider adoption of blockchain within the land titling sector.
Well, overall, I think, yes, in the land registry sector, I think it's going to be a little bit quicker on the private side with transactional use. Okay.
Right. So let's say there's an apartment building, if they put it on blockchain, the ability to fractionalize it is infinitely greater than the way it is currently. And it would then also allow for a more liquid, even though it would still be a limited market for that type of ownership.
Right. And so if there's a government connection, or if it's an
It'll be
entity
slower.
government, really, it'll be much slower. Yeah. And so and that's land registry, which is essentially a government service to consumers, and governments are slow to change. So that's why I say 2 to 5 years, I think, for land registries, systems, and related issues or services to jump on board with that.
And so how is Fibery helping and impacting this future? I mean, is Fibery essentially trying to create those common standards and definitions?
Yeah, in terms of Fibery, Fibery isn't doing it alone. There's several institutions or organizations that are also trying to create standardizations in the blockchain world and blockchain in real estate. I think GBA, the Government Blockchain Association, is a terrific example of an organization that's very specific to government. And so with the common denominator of providing standardization, and let's back up, providing education, standardization, and common metrics, I think it'll move much faster that way, especially for government and municipalities and states adoption.
All right, so what's next for you with the GBA and FIBREE? Are there any new conferences or seminars that are being planned where you're going to be sharing your thoughts as to how blockchain is impacting real estate?
Well, yeah, that's interesting, because we're in the process of planning a half-day conference in New York City for September. And this is going to be a GBA and Fibery collaboration. We're also working with another organization in New York called Chain House. And the three organizations, Chain House, by the way, is a New York-based educational and event-oriented group who is also attempting to educate and create awareness around blockchain in different industries. So the three of us, GBA, Fibery, and Chain House, are collaborating, and we are going to be putting on a half-day seminar in September. We're trying to get, obviously this is real estate oriented, and we're trying to get continuing education credit so that for real estate agents and those who need to be licensed to get continuation credit for it. And we're looking at the location at Fordham University with a date to be announced very shortly. So that's the most immediate, I think, Fibery GBA conference scheduled for New York City. Great.
And are you a part of any other GBA or Fibery conferences that are occurring? I think that in part of our conversation, you were going to be at a GBA conference down at George Mason University.
Correct. That is the conference for, I believe it's the 14th and 15th of September. I believe you'll be there as well. And
I will be.
We're talking about, yeah, and that's a conference that is on land, it's on the governance and money and blockchain. And I'll be talking specifically on blockchain use in the land registry cadastral area, but more importantly, how it affects economic development, which is really the end goal, I think, of a blockchain solution, is to provide value in continued economic development, especially for developing countries. So we're looking forward to that in September 14th and 15th.
All right, great. So if any of the listeners want to contact you, is it okay if we put your contact information in our show notes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Whether it be my Power of Chain email or the Fibery email, sure, that'd be fine.
That would be great. All right, I want to thank you for taking your time to actually join Blockchain 360 and discuss some of the things that you're doing and some of the things that is occurring with Fibery and the GBA as it relates to real estate. I think this is another area. Well, you mentioned that the fintech adoption of blockchain has been one of the easier ones. I think that that's low-hanging fruit in terms of something that where blockchain can make a major impact. I also, though, believe that real estate is another one of those low-hanging fruit areas where the adoption can be quite impactful quickly and effectively. I want to thank you for appearing on the Blockchain 360, and I wish you the best.
Thank you so much, Brian, and perhaps we can revisit in another 6 to 12 months to see.
That would be perfect.
The Blockchain 360 podcast is produced weekly. Have a question? Want us to interview someone specific? Wish to hear about a particular topic? Let us know. You can email me at bryant.nielsen@blockchain360.co or tweet us on Twitter at Blockchain360 or at our website blockchain360.co.